Evening, everyone, and thank you for coming along to this evening's Advice Line Live event. Sorry for the delay in joining this evening. We've had a couple of technical difficulties to get on screen tonight, but we've eventually made it. So thank you for joining us. My name is Sophia. I'm the Community Advice Services Manager here at Scottish Autism, and I'll be kind of supporting and facilitating our conversation for this evening. The theme being support within school. I'm joined by two of the fabulous advisors from the Advice Line team, Kirsten and Caroline. Both of you, thank you for joining me this evening. I know you've taken time out of your evening to join us tonight, so thank you for joining me. Um, Kirsten, I'm just wondering, just for those watching, could you just give a bit of a kind of, I guess, a background in terms of who you are, how you joined Scottish Autism, but also, I guess, just giving a bit of insight in terms of your education background, seeing as the theme tonight is support within school.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I've worked for Scottish Autism for 3 years now as a community advisor. But in a previous life, I was a teacher. So I worked in mainstream primary and I worked in special education and in an autism provision and also a speech and language provision as well. So I've got that background in education, which I feel is really, really helpful to the role at the moment. Additionally, my children are neurodivergent as well, so I've got the parental aspect of things as well. So I've kind of got that joined up picture of the teaching in school, what the limitations are, what you can do, which is a lot, and I've got that parental aspect as well. So I was 15 years in education and primary education it was mainly. So that is my background.
No, that's great, and thank you, Kirsten, for giving those that are watching a bit of a kind of insight in terms of your background. And I guess whilst we continue this conversation, one thing I haven't mentioned already is if you do have questions for this evening in terms of our support within school theme, please pop them in the comments below. I will do my utmost in terms of keeping an eye on the questions that do come in. But in the meantime, we'll continue to kind of introduce ourselves, what our background is, and we'll get into some of the kind of questions that we've kind of put aside as well to talk through this evening. Caroline, I know that your background is slightly different, but I think that's the beauty of our Advice Line team is that we do all have very different kind of backgrounds and I guess different skills and strengths that we bring within the role. So Caroline, would you mind just kind of giving those that are watching this evening a bit of an overview of your background as well?
Yeah, well, I've worked at Scottish Autism for a considerable time with a long time actually on the advice line and supporting, we support everybody, professionals, parents, young people, adults, a whole variety. And I think what that does bring is a bit of a breadth of knowledge. And I think for tonight, it's really great being here to help Kirsten because she's coming with a real strong teaching background. So I think it's quite complementary. And Kirsten works in advice science, so we've got a vast bit of knowledge that we can pull together. And hopefully we can support anyone that's watching or listening in the future regarding just our kind of our understanding of support in schools and what we can bring to this for tonight.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you both complement one another in terms of what you bring to the advice line. And I guess in terms of my background, it's quite varied, working within lots of different third sector organisations, but working with a lot of parents and carers and young people directly, actually, in terms of education and what that experience is like for those families and young people. And I guess supporting them to have conversations with schools in terms of what support might look like for those young people who are at the centre of it all. As I mentioned before, please pop those questions into the comments below, and we'll obviously answer those as we go on. But I guess to get started, just to kind of, I guess, highlight is that this evening the theme was picked by those that engaged with us on social media in terms of support within school. And I guess for us within the advice line, I wouldn't say it was a huge surprise in terms of, I guess, the theme being picked for this evening. It's an inquiry that we receive quite actually regularly in terms of from parents and carers specifically in terms of their child or young person and what does support look like within school. And I guess our advice line very much is, I guess, part of a wider picture in terms of what that support might look like and what advice we can give. I guess the advice that we can give is quite autism specific. And I guess that's where we might lean into other services and organisations as well, to, I guess, give parents and carers the most informed picture that they can to navigate those conversations. And I'm sure we'll introduce some of those organisations later on, as we talk things through this evening. So I guess, let's get started in terms of thinking of those types of inquiries that we receive through our advice line from parents and carers. Kirsten, I'm just wondering if we can start off in terms of what would be your pointers that you think might be the most helpful for parents and teachers to think about?
I think initially, I think we do get a lot of people commenting on how their children don't want to look different in school and want to be sort of like their peers, and maybe do need some additional support. And I think it's really important actually to raise that awareness of neurodiversity in school. I know from my own child's kind of background, they didn't want other children to kind of pinpoint them and to feel different. And I think if you've got that general knowledge of neurodivergence and neurodiversity in school, I think it's really important. And we're really lucky. We've got a really good project called the LEANS project, learning about neurodiversity in school. And it's aimed at primary 4 to 7. It's a free resource for teachers in schools. I was really fortunate enough to be on the design team for this, and it's a really well thought out programme. It fits in with the curriculum. It works really well. It's about raising general awareness, so nothing pinpointing children. And it's about all neurodivergent conditions. So I think it's, in a sense, it's a really good place to start in primary school, get that awareness raising, and then have children who are not worried about wearing ear defenders in school, who are not worried about wearing loops, who are not worried about it should be like a pair of glasses. You should be able to have any accommodations that are going to help you in school without being really worried about it. So that is one inquiry that we do get in there. So I think, starting off with that understanding, so that all children have that understanding of neurodivergence, and that we're all really different and we all need support throughout our lives in different shapes and forms. And not every child can sit in a classroom and concentrate, and it doesn't look the same for everybody. And when it comes to teachers, as far as I'm concerned, when I was teaching and when I was a support for learning teacher, I think you can teach in a really neurodivergent friendly way, and that's not to the detriment of any other children. So I think it is possible to put strategies in your class to use a very visual classroom. There are all sorts of, introducing sensory breaks and all sorts of things you can accommodate. And it needn't be a really expensive thing for schools either. Things can be done really cheaply. I've seen teachers have little pop-up tents in their classes, and it's not, for one specific child. It's like, why don't you go into the sensory tent? It's going to benefit all children. It's not just, to pinpoint specific children. There are all sorts of things that can happen in schools. So these are my sort of starting points, I would say.
Yeah, and I think they're really kind of helpful points in terms of, I guess, just raising the awareness within the school community in terms of neurodivergence. But then I guess you've spoken there about the different kind of strategies that I guess schools could consider that actually would support all of those within their school environment. And I guess I'm gonna bring it to Caroline here in terms of, I guess sometimes we get inquiries from parents and carers where actually they're at that starting point, and they kind of question, but what can we ask for? What could those strategies look like? Because I guess they don't know what they don't know in terms of that. So I guess, Caroline, what would be the advice and guidance that we might give parents and carers in terms of how to start to consider what do those strategies look like for my child? How would we support that?
Well, I think initially for many families, when they contact the advice line, what we find is helpful is to help the family to understand their child and their child's presentation, whether it's sensory or whether it's communication, and actually have an idea of the positive aspects of your child and some things that they may struggle with, and then helping the school to understand those things as well, because the schools might not necessarily know straight away what the particular child's issues are or concerns are, and so helping the family initially to kind of consider all the areas that we would probably discuss with them, and it may take 1 or 2 calls, but just for them to gather together what is it they want the school to think about their particular child. So you're helping the school to understand it's not about a strategy per se, so understanding the child and then a strategy on top of that to help the child. And I think that can be helpful, and also guiding the family. I think the advice line staff because we deal with so many families, it's quite helpful to guide a family through a conversation about their child, about their child's communication, sense, or whatever it might be, their thinking style. So I think guiding a family, because as you're saying, sometimes parents they don't know what the schools could be doing. They don't know what to ask for. And I think I always feel that you want the parents to feel quite empowered, that they know what they're asking for. And sometimes we might suggest other organisations, like education-specific organisations, that they could have a wee look at or speak to as well, like Inquire or the Govan Law Centre Education Unit. So I think it's a combination of things. That's quite kind of helpful for most families as a starting point. Yeah.
And I guess sometimes when people are, coming to us, sometimes the situation that is presented to us through the advice line, whether that be over the phone, via email, live chat on our website, it's quite a complex picture that we can receive in terms of what that education experience is looking like, but also I guess what support that child actually might be needing at that moment in time. It might be to the point actually that child needs support to reduce their stress, before looking at any other kind of, I guess, support specifically. And I guess our roles within the kind of advice line is that actually we need to sometimes support parents to understand which kind of part of the ball of string shall we pull first in terms of supporting their child. Is it actually that we need to kind of strip things back completely and look at sleep, because actually sleep is now having a knock-on effect to the wider well-being of their child. And I guess, Kirsten, what are some of the things that we can do to, I guess, help strip these things back? Is there any particular tools that we can use to support some of that, to explore some of those areas? I'm kind of wondering what sort of things would you be doing as an advisor to support some of that?
I think sometimes sort of looking at profiling, so as Caroline says, sort of unpicking, some of the aspects that are challenging. So looking at a profile, thinking about strengths, thinking about challenges, and thinking about strategies of how you can sort of unpick that. So quite often we do get kind of people who are in a bit of a, where will I start, and what will I do? And it's about kind of breaking things down, and like you say, sort of thinking about sensory, thinking about sleep, thinking about what is contributing to that child's day, because it can be that by the time the child actually is in school, they're already heightened. So something's gone wrong in the morning with, an aspect of, they haven't had that sleep, or there's some sensory stuff going on before they've gotten to school. The journey's not going quite the same. They maybe had to take a different route. So by the time they get to school, how are they feeling? So it's about kind of pinpointing, what causes these sort of stress things, and having a bit of a look at what stressors are, and what strategies we can put in place. So I think sometimes looking at it from a sort of stress point of view can be really helpful as well.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we've got some really kind of good tools to support some of these conversations. You know, you've spoken about what are the kind of maybe stresses for children and young people. It could well be that actually it's something that's maybe happened in the morning and earlier that day, or it could be the sleep element in terms of that knock-on effect. And I guess, you know, I'm thinking of some of the tools that we have in terms of maybe breaking down to support that conversation of exploring what is it that is potentially kind of causing the child stress and anxiety in relation to the school day, and what that support could then potentially look like. And I know that as well as a team, you know, we're kind of looking at how we can develop stress reduction plans for people as well. I just want to pause for a moment because we are starting to get a couple of comments, and just want to obviously acknowledge them. Evening, Paul. Glad you've joined us. First and foremost, there's obviously some kind of comments. There is a comment that's come through from Jackie in terms of, you know, I guess assessment waiting lists. And I'm guessing from that comment it's possibly then the knock-on effect of my child's waiting for assessment, but actually in the meantime they still need support within school. And again, I guess it's an inquiry that we receive quite a lot in terms of that piece. And yes, we appreciate that, you know, waiting lists are quite lengthy at this moment in time. Jackie's mentioned that she's been told it's 3.5 years where she is. So I guess in those instances, that is where we sometimes work closely with other organisations or signpost to other organisations like Inquire, for example, to talk about, I guess, the legislative pieces around additional support for learning. And actually, what it highlights within that is that children may require support at any point within their lives, and it's not necessarily tied to a diagnosis. Things can happen in children's lives where actually it does have that knock-on effect. So Inquire are quite good in terms of breaking down that legislation and talking that through. But I guess, Jackie, what I would say is from a kind of autism perspective, our advice services are here whether your child has a formal diagnosis or not. Your child's needs will not change, I guess, based on that diagnosis, hence why we're here to provide support at any point in your journey. And I guess, Jackie, if you're looking for a bit of advice and guidance in relation to specific kind of, I guess, strategies or even some of the things that we've been speaking about so far, I'd really say get in touch with the advice line. The team would be more than happy to chat things over. We've also got a kind of couple of questions, very specific, but I don't want to kind of, I guess, detour too much from our conversation because we were in quite a nice flow there as well. So, you know, I was talking about, obviously, we were starting to talk about the stresses and how we might identify that. I guess in terms of that, how would we, I guess, support parents to, I guess, support some of those conversations with the school? How do we empower parents to feel confident to have those conversations? Is there any hints and tips that we might give people? And Kirsten, I'm going to come back to you in terms of that, from a kind of seeing it from both sides as a community advisor, but also as from a previous teaching role. How might you support parents to kind of feel empowered to have those conversations?
Yeah, I think again, sort of going back to the Inquire website, there are sort of different aspects of advice on there, which I think is really useful about doing things like asking for an educational psychologist. I've worked with many educational psychologists in my teaching career, and they can be worth their weight in gold, sort of, you know, looking at making different accommodations. You don't have to have a diagnosis to get support in school. It's about getting it right for every child. So, you know, any parent can approach their school at any point, and it might be that you dip in and out of support. So there are stage systems within local authorities, and your child might go, you know, be at stage 1, and then they might dip into stage 2. If there are other professionals involved, like occupational therapists and speech and language therapists, they might then go to 3, they might go back to 2 again. So it's very fluid. So at any point that your child is needing additional support, then, you know, you and your child have the right to to go into school and to ask for that. And schools can make such good use of occupational therapists and speech and language therapists. There are so many sort of tips and strategies from them. I had folders of things that I kept that, you know, were given to me by other professionals as well. So a whole host of things can be used in school. So yeah, I would say, I mean, I had to be that pushy parent when I had to approach the school as well. It is really difficult because you don't want to cause a fuss, and you understand that it is really difficult in a class of 25, but at the same time, it's your child, and you know, you want the best for your child and you want them to fulfill their potential as well. So you know, sort of having that, you know, writing some things down, getting yourself feeling a bit more confident and prepared to go in and have that conversation, you know, approach the support for learning teacher in school, approach the class teachers. You know, they do want to help and support your young person. So yeah, and sometimes for parents, they've maybe not had a great experience themselves in school, so it can be really hard in making that sort of first step. But yeah, I would say sort of, you know, write things down and go in prepared and ask for a meeting. It's, you know, I've had, you know, there are so many different kinds of meetings. There's a website, a Scottish Government website that tells you all the different kind of plans that you can get for children. They're called different things in different local authorities, so don't be put off by the jargon. Sometimes it's a TAC meeting, sometimes it's a child and young person plan, sometimes it's an IEP. So there can be lots of sort of terminology, but, you know, don't be put off by that. Just, you know, have a look on the Inquire site, have a look at different types of plans, and go in there and, you know, fight your child's corner.
Yeah. I think I'm looking at some of the kind of comments that are coming through, and unfortunately it's a narrative that I think we're hearing quite a lot through the advice line just now, in terms of people kind of feeling that they're fighting for help and fighting for support, and you know, mentions of kind of resource and funding in relation to some of this. And I guess, you know, what I would say is that those of you that have joined us this evening, I'm hoping some of the conversation so far has been kind of helpful and supportive in terms of where your journey is just now. But also I think, you know, actually let's have a chat. I think let's, you know, if you can either pick up the phone or if you can drop us a private message via social media this evening with your contact details. I think it'd be great if one of our advisors could potentially have a kind of conversation to find out what your circumstances are a bit more. And to give that real personalized advice, support and guidance, because I guess that's what I think the beauty is of our advice line, is that we can provide that personalized element, whereas we are speaking quite generally about it at this moment in time, and very much talking more about, I guess, what the process should be and what the rights are for people. In terms of those kind of conversations with school and those meetings with school, I think, you know, one thing that I'm very mindful of when I have with conversations is how do you get the voice through of your child and young person, because actually they're centre to it all. And I think sometimes there might be families that actually their child is still managing to access school, and some conversations need to take place to enhance that experience for them within school. But then I guess there are some children and young people that unfortunately, I guess the trust and the relationships with the school have broken away slightly. And I think it's imperative at that point that those children's voices are heard in some way, shape, or form. But it might be at that time that actually, in terms of being able to verbally communicate exactly what it is that's caused that breakdown in trust and relationships, is quite difficult to glean. And I guess, Caroline, how would you might support around that in terms of navigating and ensuring that that child's voice is heard?
I think often on the advice line when we're speaking to a family, one of the, I don't know about Kirsten might think and others might think, but often a really critical thing is what is the child's age? Because I don't know about Kirsten would agree with this or not, but sometimes when you know a child's age, you get an idea of where they are within their education. So if they're in P7, we kind of just from experience, we kind of know what some of the things may be issues, and if they're in first year at high school, second year at high school, or if they're in P1. So I think sometimes speaking to a family, and often when you're chatting to a family, they'll say, my child said, or they've hinted at, and often they see that as just a part of a conversation. But for us, I know that's definitely something I would be noting down, and I would usually come back to that, because often children do give us quite subtle hints about things that are not quite right, or not, or they may say something like, it's too hard in school, I can't hear, it's too busy. And even some wee things like that is enough of a starting point to then have another conversation with a family regarding whether it's communication or whatever it might be. And then that adds to, as Kirsten has said, that kind of profiling, or that adding to knowledge about what does the school maybe not fully understand yet about your child, or what else could we tell the school about your child. And often I think parents are quite surprised when you speak back to them and say, remember your child said this, or earlier on in the conversation you mentioned this, and often they're surprised when you point it out, because they just think it's not that important. But actually for us, hearing a child saying, I don't like that, or I find it hard, or I don't want to sit myself at lunchtime, or things like that, these are key wee factors that actually are really, really important. But they're often, and I think when you speak to families, I think it really helps them to feel a bit more empowered. They've got the reins of a situation, because then they can take that and say, well, my child said. And I think often if we can listen, I think we do hear quite a lot of quite subtle things from a child, or children, or a young person, and particularly teenagers. They've got lots to tell us, but it's just a bit under the radar. But often they're parents of teenagers, the teenagers do say lots of things. And when I think the advice sounds quite good for kind of pulling all those wee bits and putting them all together, and kind of going in that conversation journey with that particular family about their particular child. And I think that's always quite helpful. I don't think Emma Kirsten would think of that, and have had experiences similar.
Yeah, most definitely. I've certainly used and heard of other people using methods like talking mats as well. So trying to sort of, a talking mat is sort of, sorting things under 3 different headings, sort of, is it good, is it okay, or is it not so good, is it bad, is it a problem? And, you can start to sort of, you can do it in a very visual way of sort of looking at the school day. So it might be something like the noise, like Caroline said, the noise in the class. Is it good? Is it okay? It might be playtime. It might be, there are so many aspects of school. It might be getting something wrong. We get a lot of young people who don't like to make mistakes, and who find that quite distressing. So, and it could be about anything to do with communication. It could be the lunch hall. It could be asking a question in class. So using something like talking mats can really start to, give that pupil the voice. And I think it's really important that young people do have a voice, and do have a voice in their own plans as well. And have a voice in their targets and things like that, because at the end of the day, the child's at the centre, so giving them a voice is really, really important.
Yeah.
I just
And I
think
think
something else in, Sophia, sorry, I do apologise, just what Kirsten's saying there as well. And I think it's really important to remember for an individual child, what is their preferred communication? It might not always be verbal. And we know we often send out to families, it's a great wee resource, and it's just a kind of tick sheet about for a child to tick about school. It's dead simple, dead plain, but it's really effective, because then they don't have to tell you, they just have to tick a wee box or a wee picture. And things like that can be equally as effective as having a chat, and sometimes that might be the right thing for that individual child. So we don't always have to be speaking, but what we need to do is understand, what would my child like? Would it be whatever it is, whatever their preference is? And I think during an advice line conversation, I think it's quite good when we have a good chat with a family, and we can kind of pull all that bit out about their child's preferred type of communication, And I think that can be helpful because then once again that empowers the family to understand that, you know, sometimes we can get information in a range of ways from their child, which then, as Kirsten's saying, can help feed back into the school regarding what might be helpful or what might be causing a child distress as well. And the good things as well. There's always sometimes good things. So, you know, and the positives as well.
Yeah, definitely. And you just said what I was going to come in and say, Caroline, in terms of, I guess, you know, communication can look different for everybody. And I guess it's finding the best way to support communication for that child, whether it, you know, be visually or whether it not be speaking things through, but writing things down. You know, journaling, for example, or, you know, using imagery. So yeah, I think it's understanding what is the best communication to support, I guess, conversations in a very loose term, but it's not relying on that verbal communication as such. And I guess, you know, I'm still looking at the comments now. I'm kind of appreciating that actually, you know, there is still kind of comments around resource. But I would really encourage anyone that's watching to get in touch with our advice line. And I think it's us having that conversation on a one-on-one to unpack really what is happening for families. Um, Fiona, you have just come in and asked whether we offer templates or resources. Yes, we do. You know, the advice line do offer templates and resources and can help develop things based on conversations. And sometimes we might signpost you to other templates and resources that we're aware of. So Fiona, please, you know, get in touch with the advice line team, have a chat with them, talk about what's going on for you and your family. And the advice line team would be more than happy to obviously kind of direct you to those templates and resources. And you know, those that are talking about the wider resource issue, again, the team can unpack that and explore that a bit further on a personalized basis. Before we kind of wrap up for this evening, I guess I have two more kind of loose questions before we finish. I'm just aware of the time as well. Very quickly, I guess, you know, we've been speaking about communication there and how parents can support that communication piece. But I guess, you know, for those within schools, how can teachers be thinking about communication as well? So Kirsten, what can teachers be thinking about in terms of supporting communication or things that they can have to hand that kind of supports them around that?
Yeah, I think you know, using visuals I can't emphasize enough. When I was a Sport for Learning teacher, I actually made visual timetables for all my classes. And it doesn't matter, you know, whether your children are neurodivergent or not. The visual timetables are quick to look at. You register them really quickly. Individuals can have their own visual timetables as well if they're happy to have that. But I think it's really important to be proactive. It's putting in those strategies to be proactive. So using things like now and next boards, sort of, so they know what's coming up. They know that they will get to go back to something they've really been enjoying when they've been interrupted in that sort of flow. Using their special interests, again, modify things and add in some, whatever their special interest is. I've done that with many things in class. It's just a wee bit more motivating, and it helps with that sort of communication. Having communication passports are really effective in class as well, especially if you've got maybe a supply teacher coming into class as well. If you've got a one-pager about a young person with their communication preferences, it's so much easier for a supply teacher to come in, have a look and think, okay, I know, to speak, to break things down. I know to try not to be literal, use sort of things that are not literal, like idioms and things like that. So, just thinking about your language, and yeah, there's so many things. We could do a whole session on that.
Yeah, it's a big question. It's a big question. And I guess I'm just looking at some of the kind of more conversations that are coming through, and I did miss one of the comments earlier on where somebody's asking about what about a PDA profile. I guess some of what we've spoken about this evening in terms of some of the ways in which we support conversations and navigate those conversations, through understanding your child's, I guess, strengths and needs. I guess that gives us then an insight in terms of what those strategies then might look like for that particular individual, because it will look different for different children. And I guess, that idea of a PDA profile kind of comes within that as well. And I guess people also talking about other concerns that have arisen. They're all flooding in just now, and I guess we're starting to wrap up, unfortunately. What I would say though is that, anyone that's kind of asked questions around school or really looking for that advice and guidance and signposting around support within school, please get in touch with the Advice Line team. The Advice Line is open Monday, Tuesday, Thursday and Friday, from 10 till 4. You can pick up the phone and call us on 01259 222022. I haven't said that number for a while, so hopefully it's right. But the marketing team will put the number in the bottom of the comments here. But also there's live chat and email. If you want to email us, it's advice@scottishautism.org. I've also noticed that there's some other people that have come in who are autistic adults who have, mentioned their kind of school experience where things have maybe not gone to plan and it's failed them in some respects, and now looking for that next bit of advice and guidance as autistic adults. Sorry, it's been a long day. So actually, somebody asking about, have you got advice around job seeking? We can give you some advice and guidance around that. We can signpost you to other supports locally as well that can help with that. So again, please get in touch. I think we've opened up a bit of a kind of conversation at the bottom of these comments. But I guess before we finish up this evening, is there any other kind of, I guess, organisations or agencies that we may well mention from this evening or signpost onto? If not, we've covered everybody, which is great, but is there anyone else or any other kind of services that we might normally mention? Caroline?
I think from my experience, the issue of sleep is something that can be often overlooked. And if you have a child that is struggling with any aspect of going to sleep or getting up during the night or waking up too early or anything to do with sleep, I think it's something that should have a broader discussion and they should seek a wee bit of help. They've got Sleep Action, they're fantastic. They've also got a wee teenage section on their website as well. And I think at any age, I think to consider sleep is really important, because a child that's got a sleep issue is a family that is affected by the sleep issue. So I can't urge enough, if your child's got a sleep issue, do come and contact us and we'll guide you through what could be happening next or where you should be going for a wee bit of help, because I think it's fundamental. A child that's tired and exhausted just can't cope. So that's what I would think is party here. Sorry.
Yeah. Kirsten, any kind of organisations or agencies you'd also be mentioning?
Yeah, I think Salvos and Mindroom, there's advocacy as well through them. So, and My Rights, My Say for 11 to 15-year-olds. So I think those are really useful. Kind of tapping into those agencies as well.
Yeah, and I think somebody's kind of beat me to it in some respects, but somebody has mentioned Kindred Scotland. Chelsea, you beat me to it in terms of that
Yeah.
one, Kindred Scotland. Again, in terms of that support. There's also Call Scotland. We've spoken quite a bit about communication this evening. They've got some great resources in terms of how communication can be supported as well. And I guess
Let's Talk ASN as well.
Yep, there's Let's Talk ASN. So there's lots of different, I guess, organisations, services, agencies out there that we are aware of as well. But we can offer and support and signpost onto. I'm very much aware of our time this evening, and I know that you guys have taken your time out of your evening to join this evening. Thank you for everyone that has commented and joined in with the conversation this evening. I do see still some questions coming in, and I guess if I haven't had a chance to kind of answer them, or if I've missed any throughout the event, it's not intentional. It's moving very, very quickly on my device just now. So please, drop us an email, give us a call, You can always send us a private message via social media as well, and our marketing team will pick that up in terms of your contact details, and the team can contact you. But thank you to everyone that's joined this evening. Caroline, Kirsten, thank you both of you for joining. It's been a really good conversation. I've really enjoyed it. In terms of our next Facebook Live event, we will be hosting our next one, I believe, in December. We'll soon very quickly be there, I think. In December, we don't have a theme set as yet, but we will be looking for people to engage with us on social media in the run-up. So if you do have any ideas in December in terms of what you would like us to be talking about, please engage with those posts and give us your ideas. And I'm sure we'll have a vote nearer the time in terms of what that will be. So thank you everyone for listening in. And if you need any advice or guidance, contact our advice line. The details are in the comments. Evening all.